All right, we are recording live. Welcome back to the Thank God for Bitcoin podcast, specifically the Against Bitcoin series. This is Steelmanning Bitcoin Objections. We are here to, again, Steve Bondor and I, we talk to people all the time about Bitcoin. We talk to people about people in the church, trying to help them understand what Bitcoin is. And again, you're going to be shocked by this, but they don't all just run out and immediately put 85% of their net worth in Bitcoin. I don't know what's wrong with these people, but occasionally people have questions. They have objections, Stephen. So we just basically created this series to go through some of the most common objections that we get from Christians about Bitcoin. And we want to kind of take them seriously, steelman them, and then just basically look at them and then reconsider them and try to put them to the test and see if they stand the test. And many times they do not.
Test,
so.
Yeah.
So why don't you introduce yourself for everybody, and then we can get running again.
So I'm Bondor. I'm Gilded Pleb on Twitter. I've been a Christian for a long time, a lot longer than I've been a Bitcoiner. And over the last couple of years, I've really seen how those kind of worlds have very much collided and are very deeply integrated in really interesting and unique ways. And so yeah, just become super passionate about this stuff. And today's episode, we're going to be looking at wealth worship. So one of the big objections that we get is like, no, and I just got like, I think I got this on Monday or Tuesday. Somebody on one of my posts was like, this is idolatry. You are worshiping wealth by thinking that Bitcoin is anything at all worth, Jesus never touched money, like all this stuff. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, okay. And I've been called out on this before. I'm sure Jordan, you have as well, where it's just like, oh man, this is not what it is, guys.
Yeah.
But let's unpack it. Let's look at it. There's definitely reason, like good reasons why people are
weary about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start making the case. So again, what we do is we kind of steelman. We make as good of a case. Basically we repeat the case that we've heard from people. We, just kind of lay out their argumentation. We want to like bolster it biblically and like, follow up and try to support their case. And then we'll kind of reconsider it. Then we'll look at it and just like, see how consistent some of these pushbacks are. And we'll go from there. So why don't you start making the case? Go for it.
Yeah. So, big picture, we're going to be talking about three things. One, we're going to define idolatry and just broadly go over what the Bible says about idolatry, which should be non-controversial. This is their base layer, right? Then we're going to make the case that Bitcoin is idolatry and that people are approaching Bitcoin idolatrously in sin. And then we're going to refute that case. So there's three major parts to this. This is also going to be a very long episode because this is a very complicated topic, clearly. And we are going to get rolling on that with the introduction. So this examination explores the theological tension between Bitcoin enthusiasm and Christ's explicit warnings about wealth idolatry. As Christians consider Bitcoin's place in their lives, they must confront the ancient question of whether Bitcoin represents a new form of mammon worship. So here are all the biblical cases, or the biblical understanding of idolatry. And we're gonna look at this in two sections. Each section has three parts. Hopefully we can just scream through this because this should, again, not be controversial. So first section is the definition. Second section is the evidence. 3 points in the definition are: what is idolatry? What does the Bible say about it? And then mammon as a type of idolatry. In the second part, for evidence, we'll be looking at, hey, does this match the, what are the evidence of idolatry? Evidence in the heart, evidence in action, and evidence of rightly ordering money, right? So like, hey, this is what it looks like when it's sin. This is what it looks like when it's ordered correctly. All right, so the definition. This was interesting to me in looking up this. There is no strictly, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but in the Bible, there's no definition of, hey, this is idolatry, and just saying it without putting like it's negative, like idolatry is sin.
Yeah.
Right?
Usually there's
So
nowhere
actually
where
had
it's
to
like properly defined
Right.
Like Eric exhaustively
I mean,
defined or something.
It's defined, but it's always defined in the negative. Like idolatry is sin. This is what idolatry is. It's sin.
Yeah.
Right. So you actually have to go to like Augustine in the City of God in book 10, chapter 3. Augustine says, "For what is idolatry but to worship the creature instead of the creator?"
Yeah.
And so that's idolatry. When you're worshiping the creature instead of the creator, or you're worshiping the creation instead of the creator.
Yeah, worship. I mean, obviously, yeah, you're worshiping someone other than the one who is worthy of worship. There's a role of the one who's to be worshipped, and there's one person who occupies that. I should say, we could potentially say three persons, but like there's one God who is designed to occupy that role and to be worshipped. And when we again necessarily take him down to exalt or elevate something else, like that's obviously a big deal. That's gonna disorder your own personal world, and then if this happens on a societal level, then it's gonna disorder the society as well.
That's right. So the second point, what does the Bible say about this? Is this bad or good? Can we do idol worship? So the Bible is explicit and clear here. The first commandment, Exodus 23:5, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord, am your God and am a jealous God." Right? So this is cut and dry.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And then third, so mammon as a specific form of idolatry. And I don't know if you've gone through what mammon is, but mammon is just wealth. It's not necessarily money. It's the power you have because of wealth and pursuing that power and believing that is God, right? So just to be clear about what mammon is.
Yeah, so it can include money itself. It can include, jewelry, like all the trappings of wealth. It's basically, earthly things that have value.
Yeah. So mammon worship is a specific form of idolatry. Matthew 6:24, "No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money." Mammon. The word there used in the Greek is mammon, which is to say wealth. You cannot serve wealth and God, right?
Yeah.
Colossians 3:5, "Covetousness is idolatry." 1 Timothy 6:9-10, "The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil." Psalm 48:6, "Those who trust in their wealth and boast of their abundance of their riches, truly no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life." Ultimate security, so this is the summary, "Ultimate security can never be found in any financial asset. Placing ultimate trust in money is unequivocally idolatry," right?
Yeah, and this is obviously the big thing here. The question is, I mean, some people might not have thought through this, but like, why is it money? Like, why does he say, don't put trust in wealth? It's because, again, you mentioned this a little bit, like because of the control, because of the power, because money is a will fulfillment technology. Wealth is a will fulfillment technology that allows you to say, like, let my kingdom come, let my will be done in the world. And so if you exalt your control and your will being done above or instead of God's will being done, and God's will being accomplished in the world, then you've exalted yourself to the role of God. You've exalted yourself in your will. Or again, it's a good thing to draw a distinction between mammon worship and or mammon as a form of idolatry, mammon worship as idolatry versus there's other forms. Like there is just good old fashioned worshiping a statue. There's good old fashioned idolatry of just like, hey, we took one part of this wooden log and we used it for firewood. We take the other half and we carve it into a statue that we now worship. Like that is not mammon. That is not, worshiping mammon. That's something different. But yeah, this is a specific thing that that people all throughout time have been tempted to trust in their wealth, trust in the control that it gives them, trust in the power that it gives them. And so, this is a very real issue, very real and live tempting people. There are Bitcoiners who fall into this, who do, they do worship Bitcoin, and we're going to get to some of that as well. But
Yep.
yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, good. Those list of verses, go back through and listen to those, because especially the there's another one. I can't think of what it is. Take hold of, basically, I think it's Paul talking to Timothy. I think it's Timothy, and he basically says, exhort the wealthy in this age not to trust in the uncertainty of riches, but to take hold of that which is truly life, or something like that. And he's talking about spiritual life and the reality of the fact that we're going to live forever with Jesus. So yeah, these are very important points.
Yes. Okay, so now let's look at the evidence, and we have three points of the evidence: evidence in the heart, evidence in action, and then what does it look like when you're approaching wealth in a rightly ordered capacity? Okay, so evidence of the heart. Well, I mean, first off, and I think this is important just to put it out there, because this is something I was like internalizing as I was studying this, which is just the idea that, like, from the heart the mouth speaks, right? From where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Right? This relationship, this causal relationship between your thoughts and your feelings and your actions, right? And so because of that, because there's a causal relationship there, what's going on in your heart manifests in the world, your world. You can, like, evidence matters. This is why you can, oh, well, brother, you're in sin. What's going on? It's about the heart. You have to, this is why calling people out for sin is important in community, right? Because if you don't have the community, you don't have the heart behind it. It's just what's going on. Okay. Anyway, that was cool for me to really dive into. But first, the evidence of mammon worship in the heart. In the affirmative, so what you delight in. Ecclesiastes 5:10. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. And then in the negative, what you fear. Matthew 6:25. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat and what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? So your thoughts and your feelings about this matter. Mammon worshipers have disordered affections and misplaced ultimate trust.
Yeah. No. Why would you like? Why would you? I mean, I'll try to steelman this as well. So, like, you say ultimate trust. Like, should we place any trust? Is it legitimate to place any kind of trust in money?
Great question. I'd argue that it is just in the same way. And this is a big theme that'll come out of this entire podcast. It's a theme that you have touched on a lot, Jordan, which is the large S savior and small s savior.
Yeah.
Right. If you're drowning and a boat comes, and the boat comes to save you, right, from drowning, you'd best get on the boat. But is that boat going to be your big S savior, your eternal savior? No. And it's ridiculous to think that that's the case.
Yeah.
Right?
If you're drowning and a boat comes up and they say, hey, we're here to rescue you, you don't then scream, hey, you can't use the language of rescue. That's only reserved for spiritual things. Like, that would be insane. You'd probably deserve to die if you did. Like, I think, there's this comedian named Michael Jr. Who's a Christian, and he has this fantastic bit where he's like, have you ever met somebody who was oversaved? And he just basically talks about how, like, they like over spiritualize everything to the point of just like twisting normal meaning of words. And so, so this is not something where, like, the very fact that somebody uses the word savior or rescue or, talks about saving and Bitcoin saving, like, the fact that this type of language is used is not evidence of something, illicit going on. Like, it depends on, like, what is meant by these things. Like, words have context, and that context really matters.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that's evidence of the heart, right?
Yeah.
How the heart is thinking about stuff. So
Correct.
Evidence of this in action. Mark 10:21 through 22, the rich young ruler parable. Okay. You lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. Disheartened by the saying, the rich young ruler went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. And then 1 Timothy 6:10, it is enough, or it is through this craving, the love of money, that some have wandered away from the faith and placed themselves in many pains.
Yeah, pierced themselves, yeah.
Pierce themselves, yeah, pierce, right. Okay, so the results. Excessive preoccupation and corrupt decision making. Serving money precludes following God and leads to destruction.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously this is, so you're looking for like, what's an actual example of somebody who worships money? And it would be this rich young ruler. I love this story because it's one of the most helpful things. There's things like, there's all these kind of tests that you can do for like consistency in certain types of argumentation. And one of the things that I think about when I read this is like, no pastor that I've ever known, with maybe like, no pastor that I've ever known would respond to somebody who thought that they were good to go with God in this way. So like an example, imagine if somebody comes to you and they basically say, hey, I've kept the law since my youth, which is what this guy says. You would go through and you'd reason with him and you go, no, you haven't, because, we would argue in a very like linear fashion. We just try to go through, demonstrate why his sin. Jesus does not argue this way. He just goes, all right, this guy believes that he's kept the law for his entire life. How do I show him this without trying to basically go back and forth with him? And so Jesus does like a reductio ad absurdum. He just basically goes, all right, if you've already done this, if you've kept this your whole life, well, then you only lack one thing. Go and sell everything, give it to the poor, and that will demonstrate what? That ultimately that you love God and love your neighbor. And so, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Come follow me. Jesus basically saying, hey, you'll have all these things. And that wasn't enough to motivate this guy. And so in reality, this was the most kind and loving thing that Jesus could have done, because he helped this guy to see what was true of him the entire time, that he didn't actually love his neighbor and love God with all of his heart. He may have loved it even with most of it, and even that's debatable, but like he did not love God with all his heart because he wasn't willing to make the sacrifice that Jesus, called him to make. And so it's due to the fact that he had great possessions. So I think like this is a perfect case of being able to see somebody who does this. And then also you do see, I mean, what Timothy's talking about is through the craving to make money, some have wandered away from the faith. So these are people who they like Jesus was their treasure. They looked at Jesus and they said, this person, like knowing Jesus is the most valuable thing in my life. It's what I care about most. And then they see some opportunity to make money, or they see, whatever it is. And obviously the one that ought to become screaming to mind when you read 1 Timothy 6:10 is Judas. Like Judas is like example numero uno in this situation, because he literally, betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And so I think that this is, again, pierces themselves in many pangs. I guess this idea that money is of more value than God leads to all kinds of problems, both personally and for those who are affiliated with you. So, yeah. So, I mean, again, this is a real issue. It's really a possibility for people to love Bitcoin too much, for people to worship, for people to, like this is honestly a really live issue. The question is, we can't just say everyone who talks about Bitcoin is doing this. That just doesn't follow.
Yeah. And I love how these verses make this clear delineation. Like, you can follow God or you can pursue wealth and follow wealth. It's like, these are two different paths.
Binary choice.
And binary choice, right? And it's incredible to just see it laid out so clearly by Scripture like that. It's awesome. Love Scripture. Okay. Third, so what does wealth and Christianity look like when rightly ordered? And it looks like spiritual contentment. So, and physical contentment too. So Philippians 4:11 through 12. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstance. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Matthew 6:19-21. Do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth, but store up for yourselves treasure in heaven. So money is a tool, rightly ordering. So this is the commentary. Money is a tool, rightly ordering the worship of God as priority, thoughts, feelings of delight, reverence for God, and then subjugating and subordinating the tool, money, to the end of worshiping God will result in contentment in your worldly affairs and following God faithfully. Using money to pursue God as opposed to pursuing money.
Yeah. And again, this is one of these things where we're going to see, we're going to see and talk about lots of examples of this. But again, this does not always look the way that people expect it to look. Spiritual contentment is not poverty. Again, one of the things that you see is that throughout the history of the church, there's always been gospel patrons, these people who were wealthier people who leveraged their wealth and were very generous to give their wealth. At the same time, there's plenty more people who don't have wealth, and this is not some sort of, some sort of thing that keeps them from the kingdom. And so again, like just the reality of God being the source of everything, whether it's riches, poverty, health, sickness, like God, all of these things have their source in God, and we can be content with, we can learn to be content in, within all of these situations, and not, again, because what are you doing at the end of the day in recognizing this? You're basically saying that contentment is saying, I have enough. Okay. I have enough. And that is rooted in the fact that like God knows me, cares for me, provides for my needs, or will provide for my needs. Cause there are times where we have lack and we do need provision. But it basically sees us living in a world where there is a God who's a good God who cares about us. So we don't have to be sitting here scrounging, using any means necessary to enrich ourselves. This is not the type of world. And so this attitude and posture of contentment is a very Christian. It is the Christian way of looking at whatever that you have.
Yeah, and like you've mentioned this verse before, and it's an awesome verse, and it really captures this idea of contentment, being taking the straight and narrow road where you're not in poverty and completely worried about your life and
Yes.
ready to commit sin in pursuit of wealth.
Yes.
And you're not on the other side of it, which is overly wealthy and have no need for
Yes.
any God or any higher order to dictate to you what is good and what is wrong. Okay, so in the verses, Proverbs 30:8-9, which is, give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. So I think that just perfectly captures this idea that mammon worship can be on the upside and it can be down on the downside, where you're just completely have removed God from the situation and you are after your own heart and your own desires.
Yeah, man, this hits hard, right? Because this is something that you see. We live in a world where, at least in the United States, in the last few years, because of abuses of power and because of different things, there's been like a temptation to basically favor and prioritize a certain group who's perceived to be weaker or disadvantaged, even to the point of injustice. And so this is something that the scriptures are super clear about. Like again, here's an example of like, there is danger in poverty, there is danger in riches. Many people would obviously recognize like there's danger in riches, but they wouldn't recognize the danger that's in poverty. And again, that's just a misunderstanding. That's a lack of familiarity with both the scriptures and human nature. There's basically, if you think there's nothing that bad that can happen with being poor, you've never been poor, because there's a real sense in which poverty can like dehumanize you and cause you to look at life in a more animalistic form, which is basically through, I have to survive. I have to do whatever just to survive. There is a fantastic video. I can't remember this kid's name. His name is Bryce something, I think. He's like this little Zoomer. He's like in his early 20s, and he just goes around and talks to people about Jesus. And there's a video of him where he's standing on a street corner, and he's talking to this. He basically walks up on this guy who's like a homeless man, or I think the homeless man walks up to him. And he just basically, the homeless man starts like barking at him, not actually like a dog, but just basically starts like, hey man, give me some food, give me some money, give me some money. And this kid just basically turns and asks him what his name is. And like over the course of like 3 minutes, he just like asked him his name. He asked to hear his story. And this guy's entire posture, his entire his entire demeanor changes completely once he realizes like that this person cares about him. And like and so like he went from being like, when you watch this video, you're like, dude, this guy's like he literally seems like a wild animal who just is out here trying to get resources to sustain himself. And in the span of like 5 minutes, he becomes human again before your eyes. And by the end of the video, him and this dude Bryce are like hugging each other, and this guy is like crying. And the volume that he's talking at lowers. The way that he's talking changes. It impacted me so significantly. And I think that this it just illustrates this principle. Like there are people as a result of, and we're going to get into this in more detail, but like, as a result of the system that we have, like where it exaggerates and exasperates the difference between rich and, or the number of people who are poor, and basically stratifies this very small group of people who are very wealthy. The temptation is to operate in an animalistic and inhuman way, non-God imaging way. And so again, this is all a very real temptation that we see. So yeah, I think that again, the danger of poverty and riches is real. The danger of, just of looking at, of expecting a certain level of wealth, or expecting, or just acting like these things aren't a big deal. Like the scriptures talk about, you don't treat the poor differently than you do the rich in a court of law. You don't just basically say, hey, we all recognize it's not good to do this with wealthy people. So like, we don't favor wealthy people. Okay. So like they can bribe you, so you favor them, but it's also a danger, a spiritual danger, to do the exact opposite, which is to favor the poor people just by virtue of them not having money. Like, oh, they're weaker, we have to show a favor for them, even if they've done something wrong. That's also wrong. And so this principle is really important and a really timely thing for us to hear and take down deep into us and think about.
Indeed. Okay, so that's the biblical case. What is idolatry? It's the worship of something above, something that's not God, and worshiping it above God. What does the Bible say about this? This is bad.
Yeah.
If there's evidence of it, both in the heart and in action, and rightly ordering your relationship with money will look like contentment. And the way that you run your life, you'll have peace about how you're interacting with the world around you, right? Okay. So now on to the argument. Is Bitcoin mammon worship? The basic argument that we're going to put forth here is if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, and walks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. And this is essentially the argument that I've received so many times and so many times again. So, and I don't know if I don't know your experience with this, but this is definitely it. Like, bro, it seems like, how do you explain this, right? So that's essentially the argument.
Yeah. So, and again, we should be sensitive to this argument. We should be willing to, again, we should be willing to hear truth wherever it comes from. We should be willing to consider, how do we do this? Like, obviously there are situations and there are like specific occasions where hearts are tricky things, man. Yeah. Like there are points where, where we can, where even Christian Bitcoiners who we're trying to be faithful, like where for a moment we can do this. Like we can put a disproportionate expectation on Bitcoin, or we can't, like it's certainly possible. And even, it does, I would say it does happen at different points. But yeah, the case gets made. The one that I particularly remember was Michael Foster. The conversation that it was like a thread that we were in with Michael Foster. Michael Foster's a friend. Like he's one of the follow. Mm-hmm. What?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So go follow Michael Foster. He's a great follow on Twitter and otherwise. Lots of great husband advice, lots of great fatherhood stuff. And I think even I would agree with the broad point that he was making. Of like, I think the thread was something along the lines of there's people who take like one issue and that becomes their hobby horse and it becomes the filter and lens through which they see everything else. And that's unhealthy. And like, again, I agree with the broader point, to a staggering degree. I think he's absolutely right. But I don't think that's what you were doing. And again, there's exceptions to every rule. This is kind of what
I'm pretty sure he blocked me because of that conversation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I'm now blocked by Michael Foster.
So it's one of these things where again, why did that happen? Because he doesn't have context with you, right? So like, this is for all he knows, you're just some raving. Now again, imagine. The problem is the context. He has never seen like Max Kaiser's feed. Now, again, if he had to compare with Max Kaiser, you would look like the most rational man in the room. But anyhow, continue. Let's do this.
Not exactly a hard sell on that.
Low bar.
Okay. Yeah, low bar. Okay. So premise 1, Scripture identifies Mammon as a rival to God. Premise 2, Bitcoin is money. Premise 3, Bitcoin maximalism, the ideology which takes a Bitcoin-only stance and excludes or rejects all other systems of money, exhibits all core characteristics of Mammon worship, right? We're looking at the evidence here, okay? So if it quacks like a duck, so out of the heart, the mouth speaks. Maximalism is Mammon worship in the heart. Okay, so I basically went through a bunch of memes, and this is words that people speak online and have become part of the culture of Bitcoin. So this is a crazy long list. All right. So
go.
Jordan, please, if you have thoughts, just jump in and I'll shut up. Okay.
Let's go.
Because this is going to be a long one. Okay, here we go. So salvific language. There's a lot of salvific language in Bitcoin.
Yep.
Here's the list. Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin is savings. Fix the money, fix the world. Bitcoin is hope. So definitions of, or deification of figures, rather. Okay. Some maximalists believe that Satoshi was the second coming of Christ. I actually had a conversation about this with Brian Harrington over the weekend. It's a fascinating conversation.
Okay.
He's not Christ, but it's a fascinating conversation.
Wait, Brian believes that?
No.
Okay,
it's just
the fact that there are people who believe that. Okay,
gotcha. This is a conversation that's literally out there.
Correct, yes.
Right. So Max Kaiser has said, and I quote, Bitcoin is God, end quote. Saylor has posted images of himself, Michael Saylor, as Jesus. Roger Ver was known as Bitcoin Jesus. We now have another guy claiming to be Bitcoin Jesus, right? Okay. Yeah. So Bitcoin as an all-powerful deity. So the honey badger doesn't care. It doesn't matter what you do. Bitcoin next block, TikTok next block, TikTok. There's nothing that can stop Bitcoin, right? That's like God levels amounts of power.
Yeah.
Right? Unbreakable cryptography. Again, God level amounts of power. Immutable ledger. No one can actually change. Once it's in the block, no one can actually change it. Like God levels amounts of power. Okay. Then there's apocalyptic narratives, fiat currency collapse, hyper Bitcoinization, and the promised land. There's so much more there, but it's just bonkers. So, and then religious identity. I am a Bitcoin maximalist. Like you have to have laser eyes in your profile picture. I have laser eyes in my profile picture. Mm-hmm. I fell down the rabbit hole. These are all like signals that people talk to each other about and put identities on. So everyone else is categorized in relationship to Bitcoin. Are you a whole coiner? Are you a no coiner? Are you a pre-coiner? Are you a new coiner? Are you a coiner? Right? Yeah. So religious terminology, there's the Immaculate Conception, which is just how Bitcoin came about and how there was no pre-sale, no pre-mine. It was all public, the whole thing. Yeah. There's this real intense sense that there's an immaculate thing that happened here, not unlike the birth of Jesus. Yeah. Which is just a whole rabbit hole So Satoshi as the prophet, or even Satoshi as Jesus, as we mentioned earlier. HODL as sacrament or sacred commandment. It's like it's a sacrament, right? Oh, this is a part of my religious duty is to DCA every day.
So there's a verse that the Apostle Paul says. He says, like, let no one unsettle you. Like you have this. You've come to find Jesus. Don't let anybody unsettle you. And so that's it's a very similar ethos to HODL. You don't let it go. You never sell your Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay, so then we also have holy numbers, right? Like every good cult has some really holy numbers, right? 21 million Bitcoin hard cap, 6.15, the magic number you need to have in terms of generational wealth.
Yep.
The 51% attack, the 24 words or 12 words, like all of these numbers, there's a very specific numbers that have to do with the Bitcoin protocol and the culture and like all these things that they've become. People can just say 21 million. Infinity divided by 21 million. Like these are like holy concepts that are okay. So that's the list. Now, the commentary. Bitcoiners place profound trust, hope, identity, and a sense of security in the Bitcoin protocol. They believe Bitcoin is the savior, capital S. This is misplaced ultimate trust and disordered affection.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so again, there certainly are people who do this. The question is this required? Does everyone do this, or does a meaningful amount of specifically Bitcoin or Christian Bitcoiners do we do this? Do we fall into these traps?
Yep. All right. So now let's look at actions. If it walks like a duck. So maximalism is Mammon Worship in action. Again, this is a crazy long list. Jump in at your discretion. Sacrificial behaviors: no chairs, no shoes, ramen diet, which is to say, sell all your worldly possessions, right?
Yep.
For the purpose of buying Bitcoin and stacking sats.
Yep.
Endure any social stigma, like literally lose friends over this.
Yep.
I've lost friends over this, right? Like this is starting to hit home. So mine at a financial loss, right? Like it doesn't matter. Convert all of your like physical energy into Bitcoin. Anything to stack more sats. Okay. Delayed gratification to a bewildering extent. In Bitcoin, we always talk about delayed gratification, like the marshmallow test. Like I'll give you one marshmallow right now, or if you wait a certain amount of time, I'll give you two marshmallows, right? But Bitcoiners basically take that to absurd degrees. Never have any marshmallows because that means you can stack more sats and et cetera, right? And they just take it to these absurd levels of like, oh no, I sold my bed and the only thing in my apartment is my laptop and my miner, right? Like just
if you have two kidneys, you're short Bitcoin.
Exactly, yeah. Things like this, just bewildering amounts of commitment. Okay, it also manifests. So the actions manifest in strained relationships, like lost friendship, no longer invited to family events. At family events, you're ostracized. Hey, don't talk about Bitcoin at this event. We wanted to have a nice, peaceful dinner, right? Like stuff like that. So commitment to, community rituals and sacraments. All Bitcoiners go on X. They go to conferences. They go to meetups. They listen to podcasts. They have Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin only companies. They have pilgrimages to like PubKey and Pleb Lab. They have steak dinners, Bitcoin book clubs, and this put together an entire culture of Bitcoin only. If you break the rank of this culture, if you break these community rituals, you are literally called out, ostracized, and it goes through this whole thing. There's tribal exclusion and judgment of people who are not in that inside group. I'm not just a maximalist, I'm a toxic maximalist. I literally have cut people out of my life, etc. So have fun staying poor, not going to make it, NPCs, normies, fiat apologists, fiat maxis. You get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. There's some real, like, people very much draw these lines and then interact with the rest of the world on these lines.
Yep.
Right? So commentary, Financial, relational, and temporal decisions are driven by Bitcoin ideology, acts of faith, rather than wisdom, need, or prudence. This all sounds like, feels like, quacks like idolatry.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree. This is,
Yep.
Let's keep going.
Okay, so if it looks like a duck, so maximalism exhibits lack of contentment, right? So if we're approaching this biblically and correctly, we would expect to see contentment. Instead, we see a lack of contentment. Bitcoiners have evangelistic zeal. There's orange pilling. We're never content about orange pilling. We always want and need more people to join the Bitcoin fold, if you will. Endless accumulation, stay humble, stack sats, DCA forever, never selling, number go up, never satisfied with current price, no matter how high, goes to a million, and every Bitcoiner is going to be like, it's not enough. It's got to go to 10 million. But it's just, this is always going to be the case.
Yep.
Bitcoiners cannot be present. Every conversation turns into a conversation about Bitcoin. This happens to me all the time. I'm super guilty of this.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are talking about whatever. Like,
yeah.
no.
Again, this is one of these things where like there's degrees here. Oh man.
Yeah. Okay, so 10,000 hours of research. Another holy number, 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
You do 10,000 hours of research, and then it's like that's the number you got to hit before like you understand it. But then there's also this thing like nobody understands Bitcoin. Jameson Lopp put together a fantastic article. This is years ago, long time ago, that basically made the case nobody understands Bitcoin. And I think that case is still true today, and you can see it in the political discourse of things that are happening in Bitcoin. Like all the things, like you could spend your entire life on Bitcoin and still have missing pieces. There's a resource called Why Bitcoin Only, whybitcoinonly.org or .com, and it's a mega resource of it's links to all these articles and podcasts and everything else. Like, excuse me, it just goes on forever. It would take you years to even consume it. It's crazy. So, commentary: Bitcoiners are insatiable in their pursuit of mammon.
Yeah,
there's no contentment.
No contentment. This is again like in the enriching yourself, enriching again generations of your children and grandchildren. Like opting out of the fiat panopticon, like all of these things. Like there's tons of. I mean, this is just scratching the surface. We could go on for longer.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is very real.
Yep. Okay. So conclusion: maximalism signals, acts, and looks like mammon worship. Therefore, it's mammon worship. The correct response to an interaction with Bitcoin and Bitcoin maximalism that the Christian should have is to reject it, to repent of all mammon worship and follow God. Call out your Christian friends and relatives according to Matthew 18.
Call out your Christian Bitcoin people, you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people who are in this, like if they're in your community, like the right response would be therefore Matthew 18, 15, and like go through if your brother sins against you and like you call him aside and you put together the case against him. If he repents, fantastic, you've won your brother.
Yep.
If he doesn't repent, gather witnesses and call out your brother, right? So
okay, I mean it's a pretty bulletproof case, pretty open and shut. Bitcoin maximalism and Bitcoin, I think we should just again all sell our Bitcoin. We come to this point in every podcast where we just realize, we need to sell our Bitcoin because there's clearly no case for this. But I think a good way to introduce the objective case is using the same thing you talked about, right? If it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then it must be a duck. And what I would say, again, not tongue in cheek at all, is like man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so the question is, like, obviously there are people whose heart is, idolatrous and who do see Bitcoin and who, again, operate in a God ignoring world. Like they treat Bitcoin, like basically they acknowledge Bitcoin, but deny God. They deny his authority, his thing. And so when you do that, if you just act like God doesn't exist, then everything else gets oriented in different directions. But that's not the only way to do things. It's not the only way to do things, Bondor. So let's just start unpacking again what basically the case against the fact that something might look like maximalism, might look like idolatry, actually being idolatry.
So first, make some concessions, because obviously the obvious concession is the one you just made, which is people actually do worship Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And those people need to be called out, right? When Max Kaiser says Bitcoin is God, every Bitcoiner who is Christian basically dogpiled that. And like, I mean, I've had Max Kaiser blocked for years, so this is not something that I participated in, but like, that's not correct. Sorry, buddy. You are completely errant on that point. God, Jesus Christ is God, and Bitcoin is not God, right? But some people make that mistake, and it needs to be called out. Okay, that's a big temptation. Number two, second concession. In such cases, like, yeah, that's right. You need to call out according to Matthew 18, which requires community. You need to be in community calling out people for this sin, if it's a sin, right? And then three, the thing that, like, and I think this is the case in somebody else earlier this week, as I mentioned, was like, you're just worshiping Mammon. So, and as we discussed about what the whole thing is, like, the justifications gives, like, those are super real. And when you lump Bitcoin into the larger, like, crypto space, it becomes its own thing. Like, yeah, obviously all these people are completely worshiping Mammon. Like, there's an unbelievable amount of justification for believing that this is Mammon worship. Like, as we've seen, right? Like, this is not a one-off thing, or just like, oh, I think it's this. It's like, no. This is very real, and a lot of people are guilty of this and participating in it.
Yes. And so the question, though, is like, does the fact that people are using something illicitly, or like in a disproportionate way, is that evidence that everyone is doing this, or that if your behavior looks like this at all, then you're somehow complicit as well? And this is where our response would be no. Like, this is not a necessary. This does not necessarily flow from that. So,
okay, so now those are the concessions. Let's look at the, like, actual addressing the case and start to unpack and look at this. Okay, Mammon worship. That's going to be the case with all types of money, right? Everybody can worship, because Mammon worship is wealth. Wealth transcends the type of money that you use. So we have to evaluate this in terms of all wealth, all types of money, all circumstances, all economies, and all that, right? So judging the entire movement by its next point, judging the entire movement by its worst examples, some mentioned above, is like judging Christianity by the sinners who embrace it, not the God who defines it. Okay, so let's refute this argument at its highest level.
Here, let's just dig down deep in that. So for a second here, judging the entire movement by its worst examples is like judging Christianity by its worst examples, or you could say, I mean, you didn't even have to say sinners. You could also, I mean, you could find pastors who've done atrocious things. You could find Christians, self-proclaiming Christians, who've done awful things. But that's not how you ought to judge Christianity. You ought to measure it on its own merits. And so this is, I think that's a really great point. And again, really the broader point that you're getting at is, hey, listen, you need to use equal weights and measures here. Like, if we're gonna really compare this thing, the fact that somebody is passionate about something, the fact that somebody gives their life to talking, or like parts of their life to talking about something, like the fact that this happens doesn't necessarily require them to be idolatrous. Passion is not idolatry inherently. Like, that's just not, it's just not real.
Okay. So let's refute this argument at its highest level. The fundamental error in the argument is an orientation error. A Copernican shift in framing is required to understand the air. Okay. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say
Copernican error or Copernican shift? I do not.
Yeah.
Enlighten me.
Okay, so a Copernican shift is when basically Copernicus came out and said, "Well, wait a second. We've studied the astronomy. We've studied the stars and we've studied the movements of the planets, and the system as we believe it exists isn't what the stars demonstrate for us, which exists, which is to say we do not live in a geocentric universe where all the universe rotates around the Earth.
Yeah.
We instead live in a heliocentric universe where the Earth and the planets all revolve around the sun. And this, of course, was a huge kerfuffle, if you will, in church history, because all of church history was essentially predicated on, like, their version of the cosmos was that everything, like the Earth was the center of the universe.
Yeah.
Right. So when the science basically bore out that the Earth was not the center of the universe, that was a huge kerfuffle, right? The thing that, and it's, it lends a lot of credence to the incredibleness of the Bible, because in the Bible you're like, wait a second, is there any real verse that basically says the Earth is flat, or that the sun revolves around the Earth, as opposed? No, there's actually none of that. It's actually kind of fascinating that it allows for the science to bear itself out.
Exactly. Yeah. There'd been a lot of, but what had happened is there'd been a lot of like philosophical backfilling, and of like, again, you can basically, if you're a half decent thinker, you can take anything and make a good case for why it exists. So like there were people who were saying, the fact that, the sun revolves around the Earth because God has, made Earth where the place where people who bear his image live. And so it makes sense that everything would revolve around that. So like you can, like that, this is what people had done. There were examples of this. And so this idea of science coming along and us realizing, oh shoot, wait, actually the data doesn't bear this out. That overlap period between that overlap of trying to let go of what you mistakenly held on to and take hold of what is actually, of what is real is like it was a very difficult process that led to, lots of not good things in hindsight.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So as it applies, what's the inversion here? The inversion here is that the argument above assumes that the 50-year fiat experiment is neutral, if not correct ground from which Bitcoin deviates.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But this ground is not neutral. Fiat as a system is evil.
Yeah. Yeah. Fiat is the deviation from the...
Fiat is the deviation. Yeah.
Fiat is the deviation. And so rejecting the deviation is actually just normal.
Yeah.
You're all the freaks, fiat people. That's what we're trying to say. We're the normal ones. It's like in the land of they say this, like in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. The other one is like, we should have pulled up the graphic, but it's basically like if 100 people are running towards a cliff, the guy running away from the cliff looks like a madman. Like that. That's kind of, this is exactly what you're describing, right?
Yeah. Okay. So maximalism. So here's the core of the rebuttal. Maximalism is not Mammon worship, but a war against Mammon worship. This is ideological, not kinetic warfare. Right?
Yeah.
So this is the basic premise is that we are here to actually stop all the Mammon worship of the legacy system, because the legacy system is evil and people just accept it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, is that the exact same type of Mammon worship? People aren't going out and being like, oh yeah, I'm a fiat maximalist. Like, I love fiat. I like, what team are you on? And like, are they using those terms? No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
But they are organizing their lives around fiat in ways that are very antithetical to Christianity, right?
Yeah. I think a helpful thing for kind of, I think a helpful framing for this, because again, a lot of the pushback that, Michael Foster and other people are giving, it's well-intentioned and there is truth to it. The issue is, like, I feel like here's an example that maybe is pretty analogous. So somebody like William Wilberforce, okay, for those of you who don't know, William Wilberforce was this British politician who became a Christian and ended up just like looking at the skin color based slave trade in England. And he just basically said, this is horribly immoral. We could have a whole nother episode where we talk about the biblical position on slavery and what it says and does not say about about the legitimacy of slavery and slavery as an option. But there certainly isn't like skin color based, like arguments of like, oh, people who have certain color of skin are lesser. They're not as human as other people. And so because of that, we're justified in enslaving them and building our entire economy based on them, that kind of thing. So Wilberforce gets to this point where he just realizes this is horribly immoral. This is anti-Christian. This is awful. We're enriching ourselves on the back of people, who are made in God's image and but we're pretending like they're not, despite claiming to be a Christian nation. And so he gives his life to getting rid of the slave trade. It was like his quote unquote hobby horse. He is sitting there over and over again in Parliament, bringing this issue up, he's fighting his entire life. It took him decades to do this. And there were plenty of people who were like, dude, there's bigger fish to fry. Like, why do you're over exaggerating the importance of this? And he's like, no, I am not over exaggerating the importance of this. This is like, these are people made in God's image. Like there's a whole bunch of theological implications and problems with basically acting and having the presuppositions that the pro skin color slavery, faction, which was the vast majority of people in Great Britain at that time, like there's humongous spiritual and theological implications that were downstream of that. And so Wilberforce giving his time and his effort and his life to ending this unjust system was a precisely sane thing to do. It was the only thing to do, And so I think that this is an analogous situation. This is how I think about the situation that we're in, is like, listen, there's 100 awful things. There's 1,000 evil things that are downstream from looking at money as something that can just be created out of thin air. And so like, this is in our minds, we're saying, listen, this is just the most efficient path forward to getting rid of a whole host of other things. If we see and think about this thing rightly, it's going to like reorient and rightly align 100 other things that are down the road that are also causing us problems. And so talking about it is really just kind of like sharpening the spear in trying to aim at a very specific point, and, to be able to, eliminate and shine light in a very dark, evil lie.
Correct. I think in writing this, one of the things that kept coming to mind would be the modern corollary, which is like the anti-abortion, like the Christian faction.
Well done.
That's anti-abortion.
Well done.
Because like everything they're standing on the Bible to have that stance.
Yep.
Right. But they're going crazy about it. But they're in an ideological war against abortion.
Yeah.
And you cannot open the Bible and make a case that abortion is good. It's like,
or it's not a big deal.
There's nothing there. Or it's not a big deal. Right. So like, how do you approach them? Are you accusing them of creation worship? Like, there is a counter movement like within Christianity. It's a very small movement, but it's basically built on those grounds, which basically says, hey, you guys are elevating the creation over the creator by pursuing this to such a militant extent. Right.
Yeah.
Now, there's probably some truth to that, but it's a very small percentage of the larger movement, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is something, again, I've thought about this a lot in those respects. But just like there's this thing that happens there, like there's this commitment that's like unexamined. It's like a commitment by relatively wealthy people that if you care too much about anything, that's a problem. Like you really shouldn't care too much about anything. You should just kind of be just normal, calm, Like this is somehow like the paradigm of virtue is just that you don't care. It's like very Buddhist. It's like, caring is the problem. Caring is actually a sign that something's wrong. And like you cannot anywhere find that insane idea in the life of Jesus, in the life example of the apostles. And like these people were fanatics. Like they were called fanatics. They were fanatical in a sense, but they were definitely called fanatics. You look at like in the book of Acts, I think it's what is it? Where they're basically, it's like they're in Jason's household, and basically the religious leaders are coming and saying, listen, these men have turned the world upside down. Okay. They have literally turned the Roman Empire upside down by preaching this gospel of of Jesus being resurrected from the dead. Like these were not just people who were content to let the status quo go. Like they were looked at as radicals. And so what we would agree with is that you should ultimately, like, nobody has a problem. No Christian has a problem with Christians being radical for Jesus. Okay, nobody does. There's probably some degrees where, if you're breaking laws or killing people in the name of, establishing the kingdom of God, well, that's a different thing. But we look at this, we're like, nobody has a problem with this. The problem, and this is what we're going to get into, is that people, like, there's Christian Bitcoiners who were saying, no. The reason why, the reason why we're so passionate in wanting to talk about this Bitcoin issue is because we're passionate about Jesus, and we're passionate about doing the things that he's called us to do, and funding the things that he calls us to do, and like doing all these things. So again, this is what I'm saying initially, like there's the heart behind this, that because you don't see the issues, you don't see the spiritual issues, the theological issues, like you're only seeing this outward thing, and you're missing what's actually going on at a deeper level, both in the get the log out of your own eye in the existing system, and in terms of just the way that we think about and talk about Bitcoin. Basically, we're finding out, like, your response, the response of Christians who aren't into Bitcoin, haven't done any of the work to understand Bitcoin, and then respond the way they do. All it does is tell us more about you. Like, it tells us far more about you and kind of who you are than it tells you about some sort of, outside perspective of the world, or conception of the world, or like the way that the world actually operates. So,
there's a great point in there. I mean, we're getting tangential over here, but
that's right. Yeah.
Like, one of the things, like, okay, well, if Bitcoin is a war against Mammon worship, well, where's the Mammon worship? Where do we see the Mammon worship? And fiat and inflation is an extremely subtle enemy, as we're well aware, right? One of the manifestations of that is that, as Jesus says, Mark 4:24, with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you and more. Well, fiat debases. And so when we measure in fiat, like you're talking about, there's this huge, like, movement, like, the height of virtue is to just be chill and to, like, not care and to not push yourself out there. Well, if you look at all of Christian history and, like, the Gospels themselves and the apostles and Christ, no, they were not chill, right?
Yeah.
So, like, what happened to our chill?
Yeah.
Or what happened to our extremism? What happened to our militant, we have to go out there and talk? Well, it got debased, right? Why did it get debased? Well, because we measure the world in a debasing currency. Like, this is, like, Jesus clearly defines a path here that, like, when everything's just smoothed over, when we can just paper over all our problems, well, what does that result in? Yeah. In our hearts, we can just be chill about everything. We don't have to. We can just go to sleep. It's fine. Like, well, it's all good. It doesn't matter. Like, no, that you want to talk about fiat worship. Yeah. It has literally infected our hearts and taught us a behavior that is antithetical to the whole history of the church and everything we know about everybody who's pushed on this thing for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, it makes me think of the verse, bad company corrupts good morals. For large segments of Christian history, it would have been unthinkable to just like the idea that you could just create money out of thin air in the way that you do, and like thereby in so doing, like debase the currency of everybody else. Like much of Christian history would have recognized that as just basic theft. This is just eighth commandment violations. Yeah. We don't tolerate this. And yet for again, like now we just treat this like, this is just no big deal. And it's like, again, we are the outlier. Like modern Christians are the outlier. This is not normal. It's not okay. And so again, it's one of these things where it's like, if you have a 1,000-pound obese person and you start talking to them about the need to go on a diet, you're going to sound like an extremist because the situation that they are in requires extreme, drastic action to avoid and to get out of that situation, to get into a healthier, more sustainable situation, both for themselves and other people. And so that's the reality, is like the fiat maximalists, the people who are just, operating in the world, not thinking about these things. Like literally you are the morbidly obese person in this situation. Like you are just a slave to, you're a slave to your own appetites, and you're a slave to just the opinions of, governments that are, that are taking as much power as you will surrender to them. They are content to do that. And many people are content to do that because they want to, get involved in certain sports, or they want to follow certain sports, or they want to, they want to have this pastime. They want to do all these things. Yeah. And so again, it's not that there's some sort of, it's not this principled action that's driving the vast majority of people who have this objection. It's like, no, this is just, it's extreme to you. It's extreme to you because of what you've allowed, your understanding of what is normal to be. Yeah. You've normalized and taken in because of bad company. Like you've normalized things in your heart and in your mind that you should never have normalized.
Yeah. And you see that, like Bitcoiners talk about this all the time. You go to a normie party, and everyone at the party is talking about how they're going to renovate their home and how they're doing this thing with the other stuff, like what was happening at their job. Oh, they got to promote. It's just like the same fiat conversation over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's short. It's short-sighted. Like that's really the big thing, is like, I mean, again, so many of these giant cathedrals, all these things, they were built over thousands of years, some of them. Like that can still be worldly. You can still have worldly minded pursuits like that. I'm not saying that that's somehow, baptized, but again, we were designed to, like, God put eternity in our hearts. We were designed to think and operate and take action that is, is future focused, and that's designed to change the world in benefit the world in generational ways, and not just to get trapped in thinking about the next 5 minutes or the next year or, whatever it is.
The next promotion, the next renovation.
Exactly. Yeah. And ignoring the hard problems that are really out in the world that you actually have the ability to do something about.
Yep. Okay. So let's unpack, like, returning back to the argument.
Yeah.
We're basically saying that we are at war. This is an ideological war.
Yep.
Okay. Now, if you're hearing that for the first time, the first thing you should expect is like, let's explain the war a little bit, like put it in context, and then let's reinterpret the core values. Okay. So we have this war. Assume we have a war. Let's reinterpret some of these core values, and then we're going to reframe the argument and look at the conclusion and final thoughts. So that's what we have coming up right now. So explain the war. Every war, right, has a context, a reason, belligerents, key events, etc. This war has all of those things. Context. We can call this a monetary revolution. Like, literally, the type of war is ideological, non-kinetic, economic, and technological. Its scope is global. It affects everybody on Earth because everybody on Earth is under a fiat paradigm. The frequency and type. So this war has been fought before, and it's fought every 80 to 120 years. The last time that this war was fought, it was fought in combination with the kinetic war of World War II. From that war and the conclusion of that war, the Bretton Woods system was established, which gave us the backbone for our fiat monetary system that we know today. Before that, the war was fought against, and my history here is a little bit fuzzy, so I'm sure there's some errors here, but it was basically the war was the Napoleonic Wars, the French Revolution, and the result of that, which was the UK essentially was able to stop Napoleon, and that allowed them to be the monetary world power for the next 100 years up until the conclusion of World War II. That's why we had the British pound as the world reserve currency before that. I think before that it was probably the Spanish one. It's fuzzy for me. But then, post World War II, the monetary world power was the US dollar and still is the US dollar today, though that is actively crumbling as we see with China and Russia and the rest of that. Okay. Again, this war is a war that is fought every 80 to 120 years or so. Who are the belligerents? Side A, Bitcoin maximalists, cypherpunks, and Austrian economics, which is the likes of Mises, Rothbard. Am I like totally spacing on these famous economic Hayek, and a handful of other guys who are in the school of sound monetary principles and sound monetary economics. Yeah. Then cypherpunks, people who basically were throughout the 90s trying to figure out how we can create money online, and how do we protect privacy online? How do we encrypt online? There was another war in this, like the crypto wars. Was it the crypto wars? The encryption wars? I forget what it's called exactly. But in the 90s, there was, in the US, there was a push to make encryption illegal because it was argued that it was an arms, like, that you could export. Okay, so if this is an armament, like, we protect our military systems with encryption and we use that to communicate, and if the encryption is broken, well, then we can no longer communicate with our ships, and then the enemy can intercept us and know our plans and all that. So it was argued that encryption was a weapon of war, and the crypto wars in the 90s, Dr. Adam Back fought in them, which was awesome. Again, ideological, non-kinetic, but encryption is just words. It's just technology organized in a particular way, and the way they won the war was by printing T-shirts and making court cases that basically said encryption is free speech and you can't do anything about it because we can just print T-shirts and print books and walk across the borders and do whatever. Like, the solution that you need is just better encryption, right? You can't just shut down encryption. Okay. So that's side A, Bitcoin maximalists, as we've described, cypherpunks, and Austrian economists. Then the side B is everyone else and everything else that's on a fiat standard, predicated on fiat, or in defense of fiat. The Federal Reserve Bank, bankers, politicians, globalists, cantillionaires, NGOs, political parties, mainstream media, higher education, basically everything. Like, so many of our current systems are on a fiat standard. And, like, for me, this really speaks to the idea of, like, oh, well, Bitcoin maximalists, they're just crazy people. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's because your entire career and life and job and everything else is literally predicated on fiat debasing, like your home mortgage, the fact that you work for a university that gets student loans as part of your income, like
government
your
subsidies
system is predicated, government subsidies and the rest of it. The system that provides value in your life is literally predicated on fiat and the devaluation of fiat, therefore. Okay, so those are the belligerents. Any comments?
Yeah, so I think it's really important too, because, like, again, there's going to be a lot of the same pushbacks against Bitcoin from Christians. You're also going to hear against things like Austrian economics, because you have, like, oh, Mises was a godless atheist, or, like, you have, like, lots of these things where these guys weren't necessarily Christians. And so there's going to be and there is pushback against some of these thoughts just on the basis of the fact that they're not Christians at the helm of these things. But again, this is not how this works. This is not how, like, oh, the fact that somebody isn't a Christian doesn't mean that they don't understand and build their lives around true things in the world. That is just a fallacy. That's not how this works at all. But again, so, like, as Christians, we're sitting here, we're trying to figure out what is real. There's all kinds of people in all kinds of fields who are pointing at and talking about true things, and that's mixed with confusion or, unclear things or faulty reasonings about other things. And so we're sitting here like a filter and trying to pass through all of these things. We want to catch what actually is from God and what God is doing, and like that actually corresponds with what God is doing in the world. And we want to let flow through this filter everything that is in opposition to what God is doing. And so again, there's at any given time, again, the fact that Bitcoiners and Austrian economists are in the minority, like Christians of all people, we should be the last people who should think, oh, the fact that a small group of people think this, the fact that this is such a small amount of people who believe this thing. Like there was a point in which there was 12 people on earth who believed that Jesus was Lord. Like, like this is the fact. It doesn't, like, the number of people does not matter. Again, a small group of extreme people, the fact that they're super extreme, that doesn't matter. That's exactly what you had in the beginning. These guys were nuts running around talking about this guy had risen from the dead. And so again, like all of these arguments are just not very good arguments. They don't withstand scrutiny. And so, yeah. And then the other side of things, it's the exact opposite arguments. Yeah. Like broad is the way that leads to destruction. It makes sense that most people would get things very wrong. That most people would just be sheep who go along with, what they're presented at face value. This is just par for the course. This is the world we live in. And again, you as a Christian should be very suspicious of people who tell you everything that you want to hear and especially tell you, again, deep-rooted messages that are at odds with things that the scriptures talk about. Like what you just mentioned, the measure that how do you phrase it? The measure that you use will be returned back to you. Yeah. And again, that's another way of basically saying, the scriptures talk all about something we've talked about a lot is like sowing and reaping. And so the moment that you hear a Federal Reserve or a Treasury secretary say something like, debt is just money we owe ourselves. Okay. Like, which is the principle upon which our entire economy for 100 years has been built. Like, there ought to be like alarm bells going off in your head, and like that ought to scare you because you're like, wait a second, this person is effectively saying that we create our own reality. We can just overcome any conception of reality that isn't convenient for a modern secular state that wants to ignore the realities of families, ignore and take away rights of parents over their children. You basically view every citizen as primarily as cannon fodder to fight any war around the world. Like all of these things, this is not, you ought to be very suspicious of a lot of these things. And many people just are not as suspicious as they need to be. They might see some of these things in part, and obviously all of us only see things in part, but like, there's just a lot more there that is built on faulty, immoral, unbiblical premises than the average person is willing to even conceive of, I would say.
Yeah. So the grounds upon which the war is being fought is exactly what you just described, which is that the Bitcoin maximalists hold that Bitcoin is moral sound money, a just measure that corrects much of the evil in the world. It's an upstream source for all these really terrible things that we experience. And that fiat is immoral, evil, corrupt, abominable money, an unjust measure that causes much of the evil in the world. Okay. And this is inclusive of, just to be clear, monetary debasement, inflation, erosion of purchasing power and agency, financial fragility, diminishing privacy, globalism, inequality, endless war, over-sexualization, violent crime, rampant drug use, and the list goes on. It's an unbelievably long list. Fiat is an unbelievable evil. Okay, so on the other side, the fiat apologist holds that Bitcoin is a new technology at best and a scam at the highest order at worst, and of otherwise no importance, and that the fiat system works and is nominally good despite its flaws. Like, these are the two ideological viewpoints that we face in this war, or that we see in this war. All right, so reinterpreting the core violations. Part of reinterpreting the core violations, like, we need to now look at the accusation about, hey, Bitcoin is just mammon worship. So let's reinterpret, like, let's go back and look at those things under this new shift, this orientation, new orientation. Okay. Is the above Mammon worship criteria justified, or is there a better explanation? In any ideological, non-kinetic war, we would expect to see the exact kinds of behavior among the belligerents that we see in Bitcoin maximalists. Like, obviously, because they're fighting a war. Okay, we would expect to see unquestioning loyalty to the idolatry, or the idolatry, yikes. Unquestioning loyalty to the ideology, personal sacrifices. Anybody who's going to war has to make personal sacrifices. Ritualistic behavior or symbolism. They have to be able to connect with each other very quickly and understand whose team you're on, right? Because this is war. We cannot waste time. Deification of leaders and concepts. Well, yeah, you have to deify leaders and concepts, because just like a soldier deifies his commander to a certain extent, or else the soldier is just going to be like, the commander's like, oh, well, we need to move here and attack there. And the soldier's going to be like, I don't want to. You're going to lose the war. Oh, Jordan, you're muted. Muted, buddy. Jordan, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I would like push back a little bit on like the word like deification. You know, like again, basically, yeah. The problem is like
it looks like deification.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But this is it looks that way. Of course.
If you're if you're letting somebody, you know, like somebody, there's just leaders. Like this is the problem. Is like we are one of the most individualized society, probably the most individualized society. Like the individual has more power than he's ever had in his entire life. Like literally, you can create a $1 billion company by yourself from in front of a computer that can give you, like, it is staggering the amount of power that individuals have. And the problem with that is then we extrapolate that and just act like, oh, well, you know, like anybody who wants to tell me to do stuff is like, oh, this is, you know, they're trying to just rain on my parade or something like that. And it's like, no, like the world exists in hierarchies. Like the entire world is built on hierarchies. Hierarchies are good. Like God has designed hierarchies to govern things. And so like, again, yes, you're going to have leaders. And the fact that leaders exist and the fact that lots of people listen to them is not some sort of indication that they're doing something wrong or that you're an idolater or something. Like, no, it's like, that's just not real. Like, that's just not how the world works. Like the human organization is actually the point. Like we are supposed to be organized. We're supposed to operate in organized fashion.
Okay. So then we also have moral absolutism and zealotry, you know, the no altcoin kind of stance is like, well, yeah, we have to have a no altcoin stance because all altcoins are just fiat all over again. Yep. And like, that's the war we're fighting, right?
Yes.
So of course there's absolute like boundaries and borders here. And those are very strictly enforced because that's the whole point.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone is the moral absolutist. Everyone. Because if you say there is no such thing as moral absolutes, that is an absolute statement. Like you're making an absolute statement. Everybody is a moral absolutist. Everybody has things that are unthinkable. That you know, you are a sinner if you violate them. We've seen a lot of this, like the woke stuff, and you know, you're basically you're cast out. There's no salvation for you if you do certain things. You know, like this is everyone has moral absolutism. Everyone has zealotry. This is not, it's not whether, but which zealotry.
Yes. Yeah. And then this also connects to collective identity over individualism, which you've already mentioned.
Yep.
But like to really beat that point in, there's been riots in LA over the last couple of days. Yep. And the Marines have come in, or they're going to come in, or I don't know what the exact status on that is. Sure. But all of these videos about Marines have been being posted, and you see they have an extreme collective identity, because that makes them lethal fighters. Yeah. Right. That is the thing that gets them all on the same page. They understand each other. They know how the systems move and work and function quickly and effectively. Yeah. And because of that collective identity, they can be very effective in their purposes.
Yep.
And that's literally the purpose of the collective identity, right? Like
Yep.
to create an organism that accomplishes a goal.
Yeah, and that's stronger and more powerful than any individual, any individual or other group. Like that's the whole point here.
Yeah. Okay. So then to bring it home, ideological war does a better job of explaining Bitcoin maximalism than Mammon worship because it accounts for, among other things, the maximalists rejoicing at both price rises and price crashes. Crashes are unpalatable to people who worship wealth. If you're worshiping wealth,
Yeah.
you're going to be selling top and buying the bottom for anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, right?
Yes.
Bitcoin maximalists are buying the top and buying the bottom. It doesn't
Yes.
matter what the price is,
Yep.
right? This is a completely different paradigm about how they even look at wealth. Like you see these memes online all the time of like, oh yeah, my wealth fluctuated more than my paycheck in one day.
Yeah.
Right. Like, well, that's evidence that they are not worshiping Mammon.
Yeah.
That's evidence that they're actually, it's not about the wealth. It's about something else. It's about something greater, something deeper. Right.
Yes. Yes. And again, there are, obviously there are people who do they can worship Bitcoin. Like they worship like what Bitcoin, like the freedom that it gives you, like that could be their, God, like all these things, like they can be, but it's not necessarily that. And so just to assume or to assert that just because somebody, is talking about Bitcoin a lot or like doing these things, like that assert that that's necessarily wrong it's just wrong. Like it's bad reasoning. It's not well reasoned. Now, again, we'll probably wait till, I guess I'll just wait to make this point until we get to the end, but yeah, cause I feel like there's one more thing to clarify on this, but.
So can the war be waged better? Of course. Ostensibly, this is not a fully Christian war. Again, like this war is cypherpunks and Austrian economists started this war essentially, right? Okay, so it's not a Christian war ostensibly, but a secular war that deeply agrees with Christian values and could improve, especially in its execution, by incorporating a Christian just war theory, like going through the actual, especially on ideological grounds, going through actually understanding this war from a Christian perspective, and literally what we're trying to do here, and using the long scope of Christian history to ideologically or theologically understand what we're doing here at a higher level, at a more robust Christian level. Okay. Maximalism looks, feels, and sounds like Mammon worship, but that is exactly what one should expect to see in a secular ideological war over money. Now, what matters now is the grounds the ideological war is being fought on. Is this war a just war or an unjust war? This is the natural next question. If you're just being exposed, okay, well, this is a war. This isn't necessarily Mammon worship, though. It can, for the individual, could make mistakes, etc. But if this is a war, and we can interpret this as a war, is it a just war? Is this the right war, the right thing to do? Now, we talked about this at the beginning of the show, or before we got into something like, how deep do we want to go into the justification of whether or not this is a just war? I suspect we could do some broad overviews. For me personally, I've gone through the Bible and looked at 83 different like ideas, verses, and like concepts, and I've evaluated them. Hey, does fiat agree with the Bible on this stance? Does it implement what the Bible says to do here? Does Bitcoin agree with this stance? Does it implement what the Bible says to do here?
Yeah.
And in almost every case, I think there's like one case where Bitcoin's like, well, it's depends. But in almost every case, it's fiat is evil, and Bitcoin actually agrees with the Bible in this and actually executes on that point. Case in point, you shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not you shall not do unrighteousness in judgment. Unrighteous measures of length, of weight, or of quantity, etc. And Like, I mean, there's 80 of these verses that just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
The biggest ones are again, like, use a just weight and measure. An unjust weight is an abomination to God. This connects to money because money measures value. And if the money inflates, it's not a just weight because the unit of the money itself is changing.
Yes.
And therefore, we're talking about, wait a second, that's exactly what fiat does. And then Bitcoin, the money cannot change. Like, it is a fixed value, 21 million. And therefore, this is a just weight. And it is like, God loves a just weight.
Yeah.
God calls fiat an abomination. Right? Like,
and I think what you're getting at, and like what you're getting at is one of the most helpful things that we constantly need to do is, like, we need to use the words that God uses to describe things, to describe the things that are in our life, right? Because, like, you could use something like abortion. Okay, the word abortion doesn't appear anywhere in the Bible. Okay, like, it's not like, oh, look, abortion, but like the fact that the word isn't used doesn't mean that the actual thing, that the scripture doesn't speak to what is actually happening in the thing that's called an abortion, which is the murder of a child, the murder of an innocent child. So, like, so what do we do? Okay, well, we have to do some translation work in order to actually see what's going on here in terms that God uses. So God doesn't talk about inflation. He doesn't talk about these things. He talks about theft. And so, like, getting down to brass tacks, that's what fiat currency is. Fiat currency enables theft. It enables governments to, act like gods. Like, there's a whole bunch of ways. It requires translation. And so we need to do that translation work, or else we're going to miss a lot of the both good and illicit things that are happening in the world. And we're going to lose, a way to actually help people avoid them and embrace more helpful things.
Yeah. For me personally, the argument right now looks like, it's going to change, I'm sure, in the future. But, like, for me, the argument is pretty cut and dry in terms of, again, Mark 4:24, with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you and more. Mm-hmm. And we have chosen to use a debased currency to measure value. Therefore, we are debased. Our civilization is debased. Our churches are debased. Our families are debased.
Yeah.
We are debased because we have chosen to measure value in a debased currency.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously Jesus is talking about more than just the measure you use of value. He's talking about all types of measure. He's talking about if you raise your kids to a standard that says your success and your production is the only measure that matters. Yeah. It doesn't matter how you treat other people, right? When you're old, it's going to return back to you. Your kids are going to treat you about how successful you are as an old person in a wheelchair. And it's going to reflect badly on you because, old and infirm, you're not able to produce anymore. And so your kids are just going to throw you in a home. Like, well, you're not valuable. Right. Yeah. It's like, wait a second, like that. That's what Jesus is talking about at a higher level. And it specifically applies to, and is inclusive of, the money we use to measure value.
Yeah.
Okay. We live presently in a fiat paradigm that devalues money, devalues people, and everything, like, because the money is upstream of so many other things, so much of our culture, of our civilization, and everything else is anti-Christian. It's not just that it's unchristian, it's anti-Christian because it is against what the Bible says. We have high time preferences, atheism, postmodernism, consumerism, the whole me here now mentality, dink relationships that are dual income, no kids, relationships that exist for no furthering, for no like purpose of growing, just unbelievable. Meaninglessness, and on and on and on. Okay. Money is the lifeblood of civilization, the grease which keeps the engine running smoothly, and that money has been poisoned. This is the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's keep going. We can keep unpacking.
Sure. So the quality of the money is the key linchpin behind the current collapse of individual agency, collapse of the church, collapse of institutions, and the collapse of the Western world. This is an ongoing collapse, so has not fully collapsed because, again, inflation is subtle. It works in the shadows and slowly deteriorates, slowly debases everything. fiat money must be destroyed with haste and replaced by a righteous money. Bitcoin happens to be a righteous money. It's not the righteous money. It's not God's money. It's just a righteous money. It is a money that agrees with the principles God has already laid out and already defined and that have already been known and studied for millennia.
Yeah. I think here's another, I mean, this is probably a good point to like push back on this, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there who are reckoning, yes, like I get that this, maybe they're like, you're being convinced, like, yes, there is a war. Like no one maybe would debate that there is a war. I think like the thing to really push down on would be, okay, yes, but there's another war, right? Like there's the spiritual war, and like there's a war to like make disciples. There's a war to, you know, for Jesus to be exalted. There's a war for all these things. And the temptation or the danger would be that you spend so much time fighting the Bitcoin war, or like the money war, that because you can only have one message in your mouth at one time in a very real sense, you know. Obviously it's not that simple, but like, yes, like that, you can't serve two masters. So like so it's basically what we're not saying is that every pastor ought to be preaching only Bitcoin, you know, related sermons or something like that, or like only preaching about sound money, because just the reality is there's marriages that have problems there that they need to hear other things. Like there's just 100 things that need to get talked about. So like we're not advocating for is that like every single person in the United States like become absolute Bitcoin freaks and just think about these things nonstop. That's not at all what we're doing. And that wouldn't be necessary. That wouldn't even be helpful. Like what
if this was a kinetic war where your physical life is on the line, then it's a different story, but it's not. It's an ideological war.
And so again, so like so this is obviously, yes, we recognize like we need people who this particular thing is not it's not even 5% of what they're working on. Right. Like, and again, because like the reality is, there will come a day when hopefully we won't need to have this conversation. And like, and again, the cool thing about this is like God is already doing this. Like Christians didn't necessarily, as far as we know, like didn't start Bitcoin. This isn't like some sort of thing that started with churches where because they were bothered and they saw the downstream effect, they started this monetary project where they could, like, this thing is something that was already happening completely independently, but that's going to work for, like, it's going to have incredible, and it already is having incredible spiritual benefit, both for, you know, people who are interacting with it. And so I think that it's one of these things where it's exactly the type of thing you would expect to see happen in a world where God is in control. But there's also more important priorities, which is the preaching of the gospel, making of disciples, all these kind of things like that. Those two things can be true at the same time. And so again, there's a small number of us who, like, this is kind of what we do give at least this season of our life to, of like trying to sound the alarm, trying to get people to pay attention to this and understand exactly what has been lost and what is missing. But then again, the goal is for there to come a time where we won't need to exist anymore, where we won't need to talk about this anymore, because it'll just be so normalized and inculcated into just everybody's, you know, day-to-day life by virtue of Bitcoin being used and all this kind of stuff. Or again, if, you know, Bitcoin
in the exact same way that slavery, like,
correct,
200 years ago, slavery was like, oh, it doesn't matter. And today it's like, that is one of the most evil things you could possibly do.
Yeah, it's right? Like, yeah. And so that change didn't just happen. Like, that was not just like something that just, all of a sudden we got enlightened. It's like, no, that's not what happened. Like, literally people talked about this issue, you know, like, talked about how devastating it was, how unbiblical, how like all kinds of things. Wilberforce reasoned Christianly to a Christian people, and it affected this giant change. And so again, there is the fact that there are even a small group of people who are fanatical about something is not some sort of indication that they are right or wrong. Like that's just not the case. And so I think that's kind of what we're really trying to get at. Like the timing, the context matters a lot. Like it really matters a lot. Now, at the same time, okay, like we have kids, we have wives, we have, you know, just people we go to church with, like they have needs too. And so, you know, if you have somebody you've got somebody whose wife just died and they're like just bawling their eyes out, and you just come up to them alongside them and say, hey, at least she's not having to deal with this fiat system anymore. Like, yes, obviously, like that's a problem. Like you think about Bitcoin too much. Like you need to have a better
rightly ordered understanding.
Yes, you have wrongly ordered
ideological war. Yeah.
Yes, you focus too much on one war to the detriment of the other one. So again, these are real possibilities that we can fall into, that we need to be aware of.
Yep. So I think I'm just going to summarize the last part of this section. But it's, if Bitcoiners and Bitcoin maximalists were really after Mammon, if they really were after Mammon, like this is the sole pursuit of their heart.
You're talking Christian Bitcoin maximalists.
Or just maximalists in general, I think.
Okay.
Because I think this point applies. Or Bitcoiners, people who talk about Bitcoin, people who get it, who want to bring this thing forward.
Sure.
If they were really after Mammon, if this was the ultimate goal, they would actually just be defending the fiat system, which is like allows them to create wealth from nothing, which would allow systematic like reordering of everyone else's affections to be towards Mammon, which we already see, right? The pushback would be, well, not necessarily if they're not the ones who are benefiting from that, right? Because like Bitcoiners could just be like, this is the problem with like altcoin stuff is altcoiners. It's literally just the problem. Their problem with central banking is not that it exists; it's that they're not on the board, right? That they're not the central banker.
Yeah, and so that can still be illicit. Like that, the fact that you want Bitcoin can still be illicit. And so again, this is what I'm saying is like people who are just. This is why I would want to draw the distinction between like Christian Bitcoiners and even just normal maxis who are a lot of our friends and stuff like that. Like Bitcoin is a means to an end. It is a means to glorious, very important ends. But if you're missing the God who is at the head of this system, if you're ignoring him, no matter how good the rest of your motivations, you're falling short by virtue of missing the giant 100-pound gorilla or 900-pound gorilla in the room. So that would be my pushback on that for all of our all of our Bitcoin
and to be clear, like the reason this works is because nobody can control Bitcoin. There is no master, there is no inner circle, there is no cantillionaire, there's nobody who can print more Bitcoin. It's just like, bro, that's the reason why it's differentiated, right?
Yes.
If we were really after Mammon worship, we'd be seeking the power of Mammon. We'd be wanting to insert ourselves towards controlling Mammon, right? Like, oh yeah, this is the thing, and we get to control Mammon, and therefore we get to dictate the rest of humanity, which is literally what the central bankers are doing, and the bankers and the fiat politicians and the rest of it. They're doing that, through clandestine means and to varying degrees, but like that's what's happening in the fiat world.
Yeah.
So if Bitcoiners were really after Mammon, that would be their true North Pole, or true North Star rather. Like that would be what they're pointing towards. Yeah,
but I mean, at the same time, again, you could have Bitcoiners who are trying to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible so that they can be as wealthy as possible. Like there's plenty of people who are like this, who they're trying to, again, Bitcoin doesn't sanctify you and make you some sort of it doesn't make you spiritual. It doesn't make you, care about people. It doesn't change your heart motivations in and of itself. So like that would be the only my pushback on that would just be, I think like the distinction that you're trying to draw makes sense for Christian Bitcoiners and plenty of just Bitcoiners. Like there's plenty of just God-fearing Bitcoiners who really do care about like the bigger picture. Like they're not just in it for their own personal wealth. Like they want to create a better world. The issue is like, again, that there's not necessarily the same definition finely defined or comprehensively defined understanding of what that looked like.
Yeah. And it definitely, of course, like you could just be in it to try and get a bigger stack.
Sure. Yeah. Just to be more wealthy so you don't have to listen to anybody. You can travel wherever you want to go. Like it could all be just oriented around yourself too. It could totally be a vanity project designed to give you the individual, autonomy from anybody on earth. Like that's, that's a sinful desire. Like to try to get away from having any dependencies. Like that's not how God made the world to function. So there's a healthy degree to which that can happen, and there's obviously unhealthy degrees.
So in summarizing, in putting this all together, final thoughts.
Yeah.
I think the big takeaways for me personally were that Christians don't live in neutral territory. And when we frame it like that, I think that puts it turns the argument on its head. We don't live in neutral territory.
Yep.
How do I know that I'm not already worshiping Mammon and therefore am against Bitcoin? Right? Like it's a very like it informs the rest of what we're doing, which is to say, this is economic iconoclasm, right? We are attacking these strongholds. We're attacking the systems and people that are essentially committing broad and massive theft and have been for 100 years.
Yes. Yep.
And they should rightly be attacked. These systems should rightly be attacked. Okay, so yeah, if Bitcoin maximalism still sounds like idol worship to you, I would just say pray it's not projection where you are literally worshiping Mammon and then putting that belief system essentially on somebody else.
Yeah.
And then I mean we only got into it briefly, but just the basic reality of there is no ethical, biblical, or moral defense of fiat, just like there's no ethical, biblical, moral defense of abortion.
Yeah.
So at least from a Christian perspective and our worldview and our ethics. So
yeah. I'm actually going to be, I got an email. I'm going to be interviewing this guy who just published I think he's Roman Catholic. Wrote this book called Moral Money. It's about Bitcoin as moral money, I think.
Nice.
Let's see here. Where is it? Yeah, I think it's just called Moral Money, and then it's something Bitcoin's in the tagline. Let's see here. Yeah, Moral Money: The Case for Bitcoin by Eric Sammons. I'm supposed to be interviewing him next week, I think. Yeah, he's editor-in-chief of Crisis Magazine, Catholic Evangelism to Bitcoin. So I've seen stuff on him. I saw this book pop up and yeah, so we're going to come on and talk about that. I can't remember why. What were we talking about? Why did that come up?
Oh, just because there's no biblical case for fiat.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So he's he's going to kind of talk through that as well. Like just basically he's putting a fine point on, hey, this is just theft.
Yeah.
Like this whole system, is just built on being okay with theft because it happens real slowly. Like it's just like, no, this is horrible. So yeah, looking forward to doing that. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm trying to think anything else you want to mention?
So, I mean, just I mean, for me, this is one of the phrases that connects. And again, it's just one of the memes that's out there, but I think it drives the point home, which is, and it can't be explained by Mammon worship, but it's laser eyes till fiat dies. For me, that's like light bulb goes off when I first heard that. I was like, yes, that's it. Laser eyes till fiat dies. We are on a team fighting a war, and the end goal of that war is no more inflation, no more fiat.
Yep. So. And everything that comes with it, which is the deal. Everything, both in terms of the power that it gives, all the different things. Like it's the human cost to fiat's existence has been catastrophic. All right, we are grateful for you all. This has been another episode. It's been episode 4. This is by far our longest episode, if I'm not mistook. And we are going to be back very soon. Steve Bondor, what's our next episode?
We should chat about that. I don't know. I haven't even looked at the
Oh,
thing
okay.
yet.
All right. We got to get.
We've
we
all
gotta
been
get
traveling with the conference and everything else.
Yes,
but
exactly.
we'll be
All right.
back.
Yes, for those of you who have made it this far, I'm impressed. Hour and 49 minutes. Again, we just want to. The other thing I want to make you aware of is that we just published. TGFB just published another book. We're running a Kickstarter right now. It's called The Orange Umbrella. This is a kid's book. It's nominally for kids, but definitely also for adults. It's designed to be a book that you read to your kids. Because again, it's kind of like a Pixar movie where it's written for kids, but actually there's tons of Easter eggs that only adults will get. And again, in this case, it's basically like it's like anyone who picks up the book will appreciate it because it's a good story. If you pick it up and you're a Bitcoiner, you will appreciate it to like a whole nother level of degree. And then I would say if you're a Christian Bitcoiner, you're going to appreciate it to a whole nother level of degree. So levels, we have levels out here. We are currently sitting at, I think, like 48% funded or 45%, something like that. We've got about 34 days left. So if you are interested in basically helping us produce that book and get it out in the world and get it in the hands of plenty of, again, our thinking was basically, hey, we want a book that we want to read to our kids. We want a book also that's a kid's book about Bitcoin. There's very few of those. And we want a book that basically doesn't mention Bitcoin. We tell the story of Bitcoin in a very simple way without mentioning Bitcoin one time. We want a book that we could just give to our friends' kids who aren't yet into Bitcoin that will kind of allow them to do some, to be subtly orange pilled. So that's kind of the other reason for writing the book. So if you want to help us do that, you can go over to the pinned tweet on our Twitter account. You can also go to TOU, the Orange Umbrella, TOU.tgfb.com, and that will redirect you to our Kickstarter page, and you can support over there. We basically have like we have like a soft cover, hardcover. We have a premium version that has like sewn bindings and really high quality paper. So that you can pass it down to your kids and their kids. And then we have just a number of other things as well. So you can get we call them it's not evangelist packs, but that's basically the idea where you can buy, 5 copies or 10 copies or 20 copies. And then just basically hand those out for good Christmas presents or birthday presents or whatever. So we would humongously appreciate your support there. We'd love to get that thing funded as soon as possible so that it gets into the hands and eyeballs of a whole bunch of people. So again, Bondor, appreciate you, brother. Thank you for your work and prepping for this and for walking us through it. And you can see Bondor's his handle right there at Gilded Pleb. Go find him. Go follow him. Criminally underfollowed. Go follow him. And just for fun, just storm his DMs and accuse him of Mammon Worship. We appreciate you guys.
Please, I'd love to chat.
Give him people to block. All right. We'll see you on the next episode of the TGFP podcast, specifically the Against Bitcoin Steelmanning Christian Bitcoin Objections series. We appreciate y'all.